So today we are going to discuss about UiPath queues, right? That's a related concept that we can manage from the UiPath Orchestrator. We'll see why we need to use UiPath queues, what are the various ways or what all activities are available in UiPath to manage the queues, right? So before discussing about the activities and the things that we can do with the UiPath queues, let's quickly discuss about what UiPath queues are all about, right? So queues is nothing but a container, right? A container that enables you to hold the unlimited number of items. When I say items, that means they are the data on which your process need to work upon. So, so basically what you can say is queue is a container that enables you to hold data items which are related, right? It can store multiple types of data. You can store, textual information. You can also store, invoice information. You can also store customer information. Whatever the fields you want to store, you should be able to store it. Then someone will ask why we need to have a queues to store a data when we can store a data into Excel file, right? So basically, queue is usually considered as a list of pending jobs executed by priority or other criteria related to order several jobs are executed, right? So say for example, if you have 100 numbers of item to work upon, right? Some of those items may be of higher priority. Some of those items may be coming from your CTO. Some of those items may be from the gold customer, right? If there are such scenario, how you should be able to handle those, right? And then there is a concept of SLA, right? So if a request coming from CTO or a request coming from a gold or a priority customer, that has to be solved within a SLA time, right? So you need to define the priority of item that has to be completed first, right? Instead of first in first out order. By default, UiPath queue support first in first out order, right? But at the same time, using the priority concept, you should be able to override that so that the items having the higher priority will be executed first, right? So this is the one, example why we need to store information in a queue. Other thing is that you might be designing a process, right? You are designing a process that requires on volume of data to be worked upon, right? And that volume of data cannot be completed by one bot. You require multiple bot to complete it, right? So to design a multi-bot architecture, we also need a container where we should be able to store a data, because that container will hold the information of what has happened with that particular data item. Is that been completed, or is it still pending, or is this waiting for some other process to pick up, right? That means bot stores this information in a queue. I mean, whenever the task is been done, it will update the status. It will update the status saying that this transaction item has been completed, right? So that other bot can refer it, right? So we can have an example where we have a multi-step process, right? When I say multi-step process, that means something has to be done in process A and some step has to be computed or calculated in step number B. So what you can do is you can put the information on which the calculation has to happen in a QA. Process A will come, compute those status, store the data into the output segment of the UiPath queue, and then when the next process will come, it can read it and perform the required operations into the process number B. So these are the few scenarios I wanted you to explain where we can use queues. So remember the keywords: multi-bot architecture, sharing of data between the multiple processes, right? Processing data item in the preference of priority or other criteria. So these are the three key concepts that we use, and that's the reason we design a queues. Okay. So as I told you, queue is a nothing but a container of data held so the other bot or application can be used. So how we can create a queue? Let's first look at that. So for that, what you need to do, you need to go to your orchestrator instance. So we have our orchestrator instance here. So I'll go directly to the dev orchestrator instance. Guys, you can, if you have, orchestrator, you can, work with me. You can start creating the same thing that what I am doing on my computer. So if you face some issue, you should be able to ask me, right? Or you can do it later as well. That's not an issue. But if you have, your community edition or your UiPath software is with you, you can start working with me, because this is the session. I'll do it in front of you. I'm not going to use a previous example because I want to explain you each and everything. Okay. So the first thing that you need to do is you need to select the folder on which you need to create a queue. So I am in a shared folder, and then you need to click on queues. There is nothing here, right? Because we haven't created anyone. So let's click on create a or add a queue. So we'll add a queue. All right. Let's first discuss about couple of these options. What these options are, right? Name of the queue. That means you are giving a unique identifier to queue name so that you can access the queue using this name into your UiPath Studio. Description is nothing but to provide a more information about what this queue is all about, right? And then there is a toggle button, or you can say radio box, which talks about unique references. And then there is a concept of called auto retry, right? Unique references means if you want to store the information and you want your informations to be unique, right? You need to define a reference, right? Say for example, you are storing an employee data. So employee number would be your unique reference so that you can store only unique data in a queue. Or if you do not want to store unique information, you can keep that as no. Then there is a concept of called auto retry. Auto retry is a really useful property when we are using RE framework or we are performing some operation on UI based application. Say for example, you are inputting a data into form. Something went wrong in the middle, right? So you want to retry that step again using the queue concept. So there you can select the properties of auto retry is equal to yes, and then in the max retry you should be able to put the values of between 1 to n. So you can say that it could retry for 1 time, it could retry for 2 times, it could retry for 3 times. That's how this property is all about. Then what is a schema definition, right? Schema definitions are really useful when you are working on some strategic project or some projects which takes care of upstream system and downstream system. So there you need to understand what sort of data would be coming. So you define a schema, right? This kind of data would be coming and this kind of data will be saving in a output JSON format. For sake of simplicity, we are not going to use those things. We'll create a simple queue, right? And then we'll look how those features can be used. So let's give a name. So I'll give UiPath, sorry, my caps lock is on. So I have given this UiPath try. Let's simply say UiPath Q1. Okay. Description, I can say for demo, right? No unique references, no auto retry. Okay. So I can say no auto retry and then click on add. So now we have a queue created. Okay. But we don't have any data into it, right? We have not put any information into it, but you should be able to see it says, in progress, remaining, average time, successful, app exception, business exception, and processes, right? These things we'll look at. Let's quickly go back to the PPT. I need to help you understand what these all about, right? Guys, if you have any questions, feel free to stop me and ask. This is really important concept. Okay. So let's quickly go back to this one. So I have already created a basic queue. Okay. Now what we need to do is we need to manage a UiPath queue. So how you should be able to manage it? I have just shown you by clicking on the three dot. By clicking on the three dot, there are few options. So you should be able to add triggers. You should be able to see view transaction. You should be able to do monitor a queue, and then you should be able to upload items, right? These are really important. So let's first discuss about what is add trigger, right? There could be a scenario when you want your process to be executed or your bot to be executed when there is an item added into queue, right? There is a concept of called dispatcher and performer, right? So in the dispatcher and performer concept, what we do is we create a process that will add data into a queue, and then there will be a different process which will take data from queue, perform the operation and save result back into the queue, right? So in those scenario, what we should be able to do is we should be able to create a trigger. We'll add a trigger so that if there is any data or any item like a complaint received, right? The moment a complaint is received, it should execute so and so things into using a different automation. So in those scenario, we should be able to add triggers. Then what is view transactions? View transaction is all about where you can see your data. So when you click on your view transaction, you should be able to see your data. Monitor queue, view chart and upload item, I'll discuss in few more seconds. Let's quickly look at what all activities are available in UiPath for us to work. Guys, so far any doubt? If you have any doubt, please feel free to ask me. Please feel free to stop me. Okay. All right. So how to use UiPath queues? So while developing the RPA workflow for any process, you should be able to communicate with the queues item that is stored in Orchestrator. What are the activities which can be used to communicate with queues that is stored in UiPath Orchestrator? So certain options are add queue item. It will add one queue item, right? Then add transaction item. Then we have a bulk add queue item. So you can be able to store data into a bulk. Say for example, if you want to dump entire data table into queues, so you can use that bulk add queue item. Then we have get transaction item, which is nothing but to extract one item from queue at a time for your process to work. Then we have a delete queue items, get queue items, postpone. Postpone is nothing but when you want to retry that queue item later. Say for example, you try to work on some system and you identified that this task cannot be completed now, so you can postpone that, right? Then you have set transaction status. So it's basically set the status of queue, right? So we'll look at what all kinds of status we would have. So basically it will be new, it will be in progress, it will be completed, it will be successful and all those things. So we'll look at those status in next slide. Then we have set transaction progress. So the moment you pick an item to work and you want other processes not to pick that item, so you can set the transaction progress as well. And then there is a other activity called wait queue item. In most of your automation, you will be using add queue item, get transaction item and set transaction status. So these are the three activities which are more useful. Rest other activities are based on the needs. If you have, if you want to delete queue item, which we usually don't do, right? So those kind of things. So we'll go to the UiPath Studio and create a detail. But let's look at what all properties we need to infer before we can create a queue item. So the first thing that we need to do is we have an activity called add queue item. Okay. This activity will help to add item in a queue, right? What all the properties that we need to set? So the first thing is obvious that you need to give a queue name where the data has to be stored. Then you need to tell reference. If you want to reference your key queue item with the unique identifier such as employee ID, such as roll number, such as department ID, such as order ID, product ID, those kind of things. So you should be able to put reference into reference field. Then you have item information collection. So if you look at here, this property accepts only dictionary variable. That means you need to create a dictionary for your item to store into UiPath queue. So you need to give a key and the value pair, right? So we'll look at into this. And then the last property is a deadline. That means till what time you want your this item to be active in the orchestrator queue. So you should be able to give the property using datetime.now. I mean, you can say that let's it be active for 2 hours, for 10 days, or for 5 hours and those kind of things. So you should be able to do those things using this add queue item. Okay, and then we have a add transaction item. So this activity adds an item to the queue and start transaction and set the status to progress. It can be also configured to add a custom reference to each transaction, and the status of the item will be set into progress. Okay. So without looking at this tech, let's quickly go to the UiPath Studio and start working on how we should be able to add a queue item. That will help you to understand in more detail. All right. So let's minimize this and let's open up a UiPath Studio. All right, so let's quickly start with a blank process, or let's say UiPath Queues. Okay, let's create it. So what we can do is, let's take example of that. We read some data from an Excel file and we want to store that data into queues. Okay, so let me do that. Let me bring a file here. So we have already an assignment, and I'll be able to help you to give you this. So in the module number 6 we have assignment, and the assignment is this one. So we'll be using this one. So all right, and then what we can do is we can create a, or we can use an Excel file which contains some data. So let's quickly look at this data that we want to put into queues. So we have this data that we wanted to save into the queue. So let's save this, save as, browse, and then the UiPath installer, UiPath queue, let's say input data, save it, done. Right, now refresh it. So this is come here. So let's open the main workflow. So first thing that we need to do is we have created a queue. So queue is there and the robot is connected. So all is good. Now what we need to do is we need to create a sequence. First, let's create a sequence. Okay, in the sequence, let's put a log message. Just intro working with queues. Okay, now as I told you, what we can do is we can use this Excel file to read data, and then whatever the data we have, we need to put into the queue. Okay, so let's do Excel application scope. Just remember how we need to read the data. Okay, and then we need to read this file. So we can do this file. Okay, and here we should be able to do a read range. So all we need to do is read range, read range. This is one from system, so we can't use this. We need to use one that is in Excel. So we need to go here Excel application scope, and we have to use this rate range. Okay, and we need to store the data into, let's say, input dt. We store data into input dt. Okay, now let's supply for loop for each row in data table. And then in the input we have input, the scope of this input data variable has to be changed because it's not available in outside the do block. So I have changed this to the sequence so you can access those. Input dt. Right now in the body, what we will do is add queue item. Add queue item. Okay, so we have to use add queue item, and then we need to provide the information that we wanted to add into the queue. So if you look at here, we have certain properties which is called item information collection, deadline, and the queue name. So first thing that we need to do is we need to give the queue name. So what is the queue name here? So let's copy this queue name, put into the queue name. UiPath Q1. You can give the queue name here. Okay. Next thing that we need to do is we need to put the information that we need to save into the queue. So let's create some argument. So for this, what we need to do is what all information we want to save into the queue. Okay. So let's look at this data first. And then we should be able to do it easily. So let's open this data. What all items we have? So let's say example, we want to store transaction ID, account, and type. These three information. Okay. So how we should be able to do it? So what we need to do is in the add queue item, we have to go to collection, sorry, not here, add queue item. Here. So the first thing that you can say is what is the name you want to keep. So it's trans ID. Okay, value should be string, and in the value field what you need to type here is you have this current row. So what you need to write is current row, and then in the bracket with quotes whatsoever the name that is in the Excel. So it should match exactly with your column name. So like this one, and then toString, just to make sure that you have nothing missing. So this is how you should be able to create one item. Let's look at another item. So next item that we need to do is account. Okay, and then account, what we'll do, you can straight away copy paste it and say in the transaction ID what we are storing, account. Okay guys, if you have any doubt, please feel free to ask. You can work with me, so you can open your UiPath Studio and work with me. You can create your Excel file, a sample Excel file, or if you want I can send it over in the chat as well. So put into type. So we are storing these three information in the queue. Okay, and then save it. Okay, and let's double a breakpoint so that we should be able to see the information with the help of this one. So let's quickly start running this item. So let's run on debug. Okay, so it's here. So current item is whatsoever it is, step into. All right, so one iteration has been completed. So now we go to here, refresh this page. You should be able to refresh it from here, or you should be able to refresh from here. As of now, there is nothing here. You see, everything is 0. And now, if you see the view transaction, a new item has appeared here. So the moment a queue item is added, it will be status in new. How you should be able to see the data? So if you click on view details, you should be able to see the data here. So what is the data? Transaction ID, account, and type. This is the data that we have created, right? UiPath also create a unique identifier, GUID, for each transaction that will be used internally for UiPath to communicate with Studio and Orchestrator. But what data we have saved? So we have saved transaction ID, account, and type. These details are here, right? So we have one item with new. Let's go back to the Studio. Let's toggle this breakpoint. Okay, and step into again. And now do one more time just to test it. Okay, now you come here again to this page, and you should be able to see these many items has been created. Guys, any doubt so far how to add item in a queue? Anyone? Shivam, all good?
Yes, but can you use reference property as well?
Yeah, I'll use that. That's the next step that I'm going to do.
Okay.
Any other doubt?
Satish, how about item information collection?
Yeah, so that item information collection is coming here, right? Whatever the item information collection we have sent, you can see here, that's stored in a specific data. So that's basically item collection come as an object, right? And that's a dictionary. So whatever the information that we have saved, that is coming as a dictionary. So the key is the column name that we have given and the value that we are reading from the Excel file. So this is basically, so when you want to process this data, what we need to do? So the entire this data will be stored in a transaction item, and the unit transaction item number is this one. So the moment you read the data, the transaction item dot specific data, and then if you pass this information, you should be able to get it. So I'll explain you that in the next step, right? So let's quickly look at how we should be able to set the reference field and then deadlines. Okay. And then we'll move to.
There is one more property, right? Like,
yeah.
We just take the dictionary object. Here we have provided arguments. There's one more property. How about that item information collection?
Yeah.
So,
no, this is different information. It is, basically what happened is, if you want to put some additional information about that collection itself, right? So you should be able to put that information. That's basically for a specific queue item. So for every queue item, there will be additional property for that particular queue item, right? So we do not want to complicate this thing, but this thing can be used in a RE framework. Okay. Yeah, so we can discuss about those things. But as I told you, basically what we look for, what we want to store in a queue, We want to store the reference, we want to store deadline, and we want to store the data that we need to process. So data can be stored in item information in a form of collections, right? Or we need to set the priority as well. So what we can do is now I'll change this priority to, let me stop the bot, because unless I stop, I won't be able to change anything. Okay, so now let's set the priority for this bot to normal to high. I mean the queue item to high. Okay, and in the reference, what we can do in the reference also, we can use the same detail like how we are putting here. Okay, so if you go collection, similarly, what I wanted to do is I wanted to put this as a reference. Okay, so I'll put this as a reference for the new queue item. Okay, now save it. Okay, and I have changed this. Yeah, and now I also want to set the time that I have discussed. Okay, so you should be able to change the postponement date, time, and all those things, right? So how you should be able to do, all you need to do is here in this one, you need to type date time, date time, sorry, date time dot now dot, if you want to say for example add, and let me say I wanted to add hours, and then I put 2. Okay, so this I have put, oh sorry, I put into postpone, I have to put this into deadline. Okay, save it. All right, so now I have changed something, right? I have set the deadline, I have changed the priority to high, I have set the reference. Okay, now let's run it. Toggle a breakpoint, toggle a breakpoint, and let's run this. Okay, step into just to showcase 2 items has been added. Okay, let's go back to queues, refresh it. Are you able to see the changes? So reference here is this one, and the deadline is date time now plus 2 hours, right? And this time is basically based on your orchestrator server time. So that's the reason it's taking the time according to the orchestrator server time stamp, right? Got my point? Any doubt here?
Yes, after what is the use of reference properties? How, like, we have given this unique ID, but how we can use in the code? How can you make use of it?
We can get the queue using a reference number, first thing. Okay, get the item using reference number. Second thing, it will avoid duplication of data, right? So let me go to here, UiPath queues. Okay, and now go to the queues, added this, and now set a unique reference. It will not allow you now, so let's what we can do is create a new queue item. Okay, and now I say unique reference number, auto retry no. Okay, so what I'll do now is I'll change the properties into studio for this add queue item. Let me stop the bot first. Okay, and I'll change the queue, this one to, sorry, not this one. So I think I have it in Q2. Okay, just to cross check. It's a queues. Oh, sorry, S as well. So it's queues 2. Okay, Now let's run this. Let's break this toggle breakpoint and run this.
Satish, if this way every user creates their own queue and there will be too many items in the orchestrator, right?
Let hold Park, I got your question, so I'll come back to that. Let's quickly look at this concept and then I'll come back on that.
Sorry.
So now if we go here, so you can see these are the references and these are the items created with a high. Okay. Now we have created a property with the reference, unique references, right? So now let's run this bot again. What will happen? Do you see this? It's not able to add a queue item because it's a duplicate reference. Right?
Okay. Yeah.
So basically what we're trying to do, we wanted to store information only once. There should not be duplicative for the same ticket to be created again and again and those kind of thing, right? So in those cases, we use the unique reference. So it will not create it. We won't be able to create a queue item again with the same unique reference number for that particular day. Or you should be able to define, your reference using the composite keys, like what you can do plus, date time dot now or something, file name. Usually how we do in our production environment, whenever we need to create a queue, so we take, row number plus file name, current date and time, and unique reference number, 4 points as a composite key to create a unique reference, so that next time we need to run for a different file and it contains the same account number, it should be able to create. You got my point? So it's basically your logic, how you want to uniquely identify your transaction, right? So you should be able to create keys on the basis of itself. All right. So we already, worked on the queue item. So let's comment these two. We don't need them. So let's disable them. And now we'll fetch the information from queue to process it into different system. All right. So let's quickly go back to PPT. So far good, everything good. You don't or you have doubt on anything here? Good, right?
So this is concept queues in the orchestrator, right?
Yes.
How to deal the queues in the orchestrator?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now,
And Satish,
yes, please.
Without unique reference,
Mhm.
like can we avoid addition of similar data to queues?
Obviously, you can do. What you can do is you can build a logic into the workflow itself.
Okay.
Yeah. So here you should be able to. You have a couple of options, right? What you can do is the source itself. You can remove the duplicate first thing at the source side. What you can do is whenever you wanted to add an item, what you can do is you can get the item from and then compare it. So it's basically comparison and all those kind of things, but that's avoidable situation. We should avoid doing those things. But yes, to answer your query, we should be able to build a logic in the workflow itself so that it avoid a duplicate transaction. All right, so let's do next thing, that we need to get the information from queue, okay, and process that. So for that, what we do, we use get transaction item. Okay, and what get transaction item work looks for. So look at the property. So it looks for a property called input queue name. So let's give a queue name. So let's start working from the this queue that we have created, just queue number 2, for example. Okay, so let's take this one and put this information here in the queue name. Okay. In the modern design, it asks for a folder path as well sometime. Basically, when you have multiple folder, right? So if it asks, we'll set this. Otherwise, let's keep it blank for as of now, right? Okay. So what the moment you give the queue name, what it will do? Okay. With the queue name, it matches the queue and look for the item that are in a new state. That are in a new state. Now we need to create a variable. Okay. So what we can do is out this is the output, right? So we need to store the output into some variable. So let's say we say a transaction item or trans item. So the result will be saved into a variable type called queue item trans item, right? The moment you fetch the information. Okay. Now say for example, I need to fetch only required information, not all data. So how we should be able to do it? So we have here specific data, right? Trans ID, account and type. Okay. So what we should be able to do is we should be able to fetch this information using a concept called trans item dot specific content, right? So you should be able to fetch this information. Okay. So let's do that. So let's put a assign variable. Okay. And then say for example control K and set variable called account number. Okay, and account number is stored where? So it is stored in trans item dot specific content, then in the bracket with quotes you need to type account. Okay, and obviously you can put two string and two trim just to avoid any spaces and all those things. It's a best practice to do that. And when you print it sorry, you can print using log message as well. So now we print it with info saying account number plus, you can put simply colon here. Sorry, it's lagging today. I don't know when I type and hold on a second. I don't know why it is lagging. Account number is colon plus account number dot toString. Okay, so we should be able to print the information. Now toggle breakpoint, save it. Now tell me, just guess which, we have 16 items, right? We have 16 items in a queue. So when I run this get transaction item, which item will be picked? This item or the item that is which is added first? Which item will be picked first?
First one.
First one? This one or this one? Let's run it. Yeah, so let's run it. Step into. Account number is 123. Okay, let's look at an Excel file. So it is 1 2 3. This is the first item. So it works in first out order. That's the reason it will take the first item. Okay. Got my point? Any doubt here? Now let's go to the orchestrator and see, refresh this. Now, if you look at the status of one item has changed. Status of one item has changed. The item which is added first, if you look at the timestamp, you should be able to notice that this is the item which is added first, moved into in progress, and others are in a new. So if you are designing a multi-bot architecture, the moment you call the get transaction item, it will pick the item from the queues whose status are new. So if we run this bot again, what it will do, it will take the next item automatically without worrying about the one which is in progress. So let's run this again and see what will happen. Account number is same, and that's the reason you are looking at it. But if you go to orchestrator, refresh it, you can refresh it from here as well. So you will see that this item, which is 23, also becoming progress. So if you have multi-bot running, it looks for the new status in order of first in, first out. And this is a real interview question, guys. So many times when you go into interview, people will ask you, what will happen if there is a transaction item which is already in progress and other bot wants to read the item from a queue. So it will take the next item available which has status as new, right? Now, whatsoever things we need to do using that data. Say for example, I need to put this information to SAP application or any third-party application or perform some calculations or whatsoever, right? Say for example, if we have amount here as well, right? I don't know if I have stored amount or not. I think I have stored only transaction ID, account, and type. So on the, say for example, on the basis of type, you want to perform different operation. So what you can do is you can create another variable similar to like this, right? For the type, and you can put a if else statement and perform the required operation for the different type of queue items. Okay, got it? Any doubt here so far? You should be able to read. So far we have learned how to put information into queue, how to get information from the queue. Now, the moment the task is completed, whatever the task you want to perform, you should be able to perform it here, right? Write into a different workflow file, execute that, and once it is completed, we need to set the status. So let us stop the bot, put a comment here. Whatever the task you want to perform, you perform task. Perform task here. And then what we need to do, we need to set status, right? That means set transaction status. So we need to use this one. Okay. So when you set the transaction status, what all things that you need to give, right? So you need to give the variable that is collected from here. So what we can do, because that contains the unique reference number property. I have shown you for each transaction there is a unique reference, which is basically this one. So UiPath automatically take care of this. All you need to do is tell which variable contains the transaction item. So for our example, what is a transaction item? Transaction item is a trans item. So you should be able to give a trans item. Now you have some properties here, right? What if you want to store some data into the output, right? So that other bot should be able to perform some task. As of now, let's take example of this one. So in the output data, we have none. So guys, this is another interview question. How you should be able to store calculated data into the queues so that the visualization or reporting could happen. What has happened with that particular data? Say, for example, you have a workflow, right? And that's calculate the loan has to be given or not, right? So you can perform lot many, calculations and, logic there, but you should say that for this transaction item, loan approved or loan not approved. So you should be able to store those data as output so that when you do a reporting on a top of queue item, like, you can create an insight reporting or Power BI or a Tableau to showcase your management that how many item has been completed by the bot. There this data will be pretty useful, right? So let's quickly set a output data here. Again, output data would be collection. So let's say result is the name of output, and what we wanted to say here is approved. Okay, so in the output and status we should be able to set either successful or failed, so we can say successful. Okay, so save it, and now we can run this bot again. So what it will do, it will pick another item, get print the item, account number, and then set the transaction as. So let's run it. Transaction ended. So let's go back to the orchestrator and then refresh this page. Now you can see the status has changed to successful. So we have seen status new when an item is added. When item is picked, it will become in progress. When it is completed, it will become successful, right? And now let's look at the output data. So we go here, and in output we have results set as approved. Okay, and you should be able to see the history when something has been done on that particular queue item as well. And right, so this is in case of success. Let's talk about the failure. So this time I'll run this same bot again, and now I'll change the successful scenario to failed. Okay, and when it is a failed, right, you cannot set the output. So that's, the limitation they have given, so I can't do much about it. Okay, but you need to provide the reason why this has failed. So you have different reason. Either you have a business exception or application exception, right? So we'll say business exception, right? Or you should be able to put failed as person is defaulter, right? Yeah, here you can put loan amount is too high, right? Save this. Okay, and now run this bot. So let me remove this breakpoint and run this. Okay, now we go to queues again. It will pick this item and it will mark as failed, and this time you have exception column updated with the business, and if you click here and view details, it will show you the reason why it has been failed. Loan amount is too high, failed as person is defaulter, right? Similarly, you should be able to put the failure as application exception as well. So say, for example, if you want to put as application exception, you should be able to do saying SAP is down. screen not responding. Save it. Run it again. Okay, now go back to this one. This message will also come when you have failed something with application exception, because that's how UiPath has, set up the notification feature. So you will see this item has also failed, this time with the application. And then if you look at the view details, all those information is here. Guys, you able to understand this? Any doubt here? Any questions? Any query?
Here,
Mm-hmm.
that application is like hard coded, right? What if it happens in the real time and that real time error that need to be captured over here, right? That should be the scenario.
That's a really good question. So what we usually do is we usually surround this with a try and catch block. Okay, and the try block everything would be there, and in the whatever the set transaction status, this will become into the catch block. So you will capture all the exception. Okay, sorry, let's take example of different one. You can paste this. Okay, and for the transaction item you need to set this, let's go here, let's expand this one, and this transaction item scope has to be changed. So now this variable has to go into the try and catch block. Okay, and then whatever the task we need to perform, so that's basically exception concept. So whatever the task we need to perform, we put that into a try block, right? And then you have a logic to ascertain that the task has been completed or not. So if something goes wrong with the application error, it will be catched here, right? And there you should be able to put the information that this transaction has failed due to so and so. You got my point? And there in the reason, what you can do here is, instead of putting this hard code values, what you should be able to do is you have exception object dot message. So it will print the exception message. Okay, and then you should be also able to put exception dot source, so where the exception has occurred. Okay, so this way it should be able to print the exception. So let's do one thing. If we want to test it, we need to create different kinds of exception, because invalid operation cannot be created easily. So what we can do is we can put another exception called system.io exception. Okay, and in the system.io exception we can cut, and let's put it here. Sorry, I'll explain this concept, so don't worry about it. We will have this option. So now we need to deliberately code something which will throw that error. So what we can do is we can read a file, and that will throw an error. So here, once account number is added here, we'll read a file. So read, or what we can do is read, we can use read range. Sorry, not this read range. We can read a CSV file here, and let's take the we have anything, right? And let's change the path here, so that should not be able to read it. Okay, and output should be control K test. Not on this. Okay, so if you look at the output, what happened this time is bot has failed to read this file. Okay, and then it will move to the transaction ended status, and let's look at the queue item now. So when we refresh now, we have another failed item here with the application. Okay, and there you should be able to see why it has failed. So you can see the dynamic exception message coming here. What caused the issue? So UiPath Excel activity has caused the issue. What is the issue? So could not find a part of the path because I deliberately changed the path, right? This is really important concept. So we usually keep the set transaction status into try catch block, right? Based on the exception. We could have a business exception or we could have application exception. We should be able to set the output details here. Hope this help. I'm able to answer your query. Right? Any doubt, guys, on this? Hello? Anyone? You able to understand how we should be able to set a dynamic exception, error, and exception messages?
Satish,
Yeah.
question.
Mm-hmm.
So like we are updating the queue data. I mean, in the output data when we are setting the transaction, right? So
No,
is there
output,
any other activity?
Hold on. Output data can be only set when you have success. In failure, you can't set it. That's a limitation given by UiPath.
So if it's an exception, we cannot set any exception message or something there, right?
No.
Okay. And is there any other activity which we can use, other than set transaction status, while processing? If we want to set any data like even this transaction ID, account type, or output data, is there any activity which we can update the information?
I mean,
without using?
You can use the orchestrator APIs to add the information using queues API apart from this. So that's the only way. You can use API.
Okay, got it.
Yeah. So basically, what happened is, when you have a tightly coupled system, say for example, system service now is integrated with your UiPath orchestrator, right? And you want to create a, queue item on the basis of incident ticket that has been created into ServiceNow. So what you can do in ServiceNow, you should be able to create a flow. In the flow, you will use UiPath Orchestrator API, which is responsible for adding a queue data. And there you should be able to pass this information for a specific data so that when the bot will pick that item or a queue item which is related to that incident, it should be able to access those information. So that's how we integrate different system. So it's only one way of putting this data, right? Using the Excel file. We can use multiple methods to add a data into the queue. We can get the information from mail, we can get the information from third-party system, we can get the information from API and all those things, right? But ultimately, what you need to do is pass a collection, and that collection should be dictionary that should contains key value pair. Right, guys? Any doubt here? If you are able to understand this, that means you are pretty much good with how queue works, and you should be able to answer any query, any interview question related to queues. So I try to help you understand everything that how queue works, right? Usually there will be interview questions on the basis of status, unique references, and how you should be able to set the exception messages. So that's how interviewer will ask you and judge you that how you work with a queue item, right? And if you are able to understand these concepts, you are pretty much good with UiPath queues. All right. So let's quickly move to the other important concept of, queues. So we have looked at add transaction item. We need to also look for a way where we need to add a bulk amount of item in a queue. So as of now, what we have seen, we are doing a for loop, right? Each item is added once. Each item is added once, right? Instead of adding all item one by one, we should be also able to add entire data in a one go. And then you will ask, what is the difference between adding a bulk item and adding a one item, right? So when you add a bulk item, right, what you need to do is you need to pass a data table, right? And if there is a failure for one particular item in that data table, you won't be able to create item. So it follows a strategy or a commit type, all or nothing. So say for example, if your Excel have 100 records and you want to add all 100 records into UiPath queues, so you should be able to use bulk add queue items, right? But if something goes wrong, either it will store all or nothing, right? So if all are success, it will add it. If there is a failure, it will not be added. So that's the reason we use queue item one by one. But the problem would be if you have a large amount of data, 10,000 records or 50,000 records to be added into queue. It will take time in a loop. So in those scenarios, what we do is we add the data in a bulk and then, right, we perform operations on a specific transaction item, right? Okay. Other thing is that what if the source of information that need to be added is coming from the different sources, and based on the references you want to create queue item differently, right? Say for example, you have set up a contact center, right? Anybody can raise a request using social media channel or email or telephone line, right? So there are three sources. The request that you are getting from the email has to be picked first, right? And the request that is coming from the social media and the customer type is gold has to be picked second. So in those scenario, what you need to do is you need to use add single queue item, and you need to define your business logic that if customer type is so and so based on the references exist in XYZ system, the queue item should be of high priority and has to be completed in a 2 hours. Those kind of things. So let's quickly look at how we should be able to add the bulk data and then we'll complete this session. So get transaction data item we have already covered. Delete queue item is nothing but if you want to delete item from the new state. So only the item which are in a new state has to be deleted. Set transaction status, I already explained you. Output is a collection of additional information, right? Status is failed and success, and transaction item is an item for which status has to be updated. So these are the three properties that you need to look for, right? So with this, we'll be able to complete the details on the queue. So let's quickly go back to our example, okay, and see how we should be able to add the bulk data. All right, so for adding a bulk data, what I need to do is let me comment all of these items, disable, this, and let's enable this one because we are going to use the data that is coming, sorry, control E. So whatever the output that is coming from this activity, which is here, input DT, I'm going to add as a bulk item. So we'll use bulk add queue items. Okay, and you need to give a data table name, so which is input DT. Okay, and then a queue name. So let's quickly create another queue because we do not want to mess up with this data, or we have this queue which do not contains unique reference number, so we can use this one as well. So let's sake of simplicity create a new one, bulk, and I'm not putting anything just for sake of simplicity. So we have another queue item called bulk, and there I'll give a queue name as bulk. Okay, save it. All right, and now I don't think we have any other activities here. If something goes wrong, it will come here, but nothing will. And let's look at the properties once before we do things. So what are the properties we have? So we have a strategy here, all and nothing, right? And then we have a folder path, and then we have a result. So what the result will be stored? Result will be again a data table. Okay, so we don't need to think about it. Let's save it and run this. What happened? Oh, sorry. It's trying to print this one, which is not available. So that's not an issue because we have already done the task. So let's refresh it. And then we need to go here. And you can see all the data is added into one go. Right? But did you notice that we don't have opportunity here? Sorry, this one, to set the status and other thing, right? We won't be able to set the status, high, priority, and all those things, right? We don't have those options. So that's how you need to decide how you want to add the item into queue. Are you going to use them using a bulk, add queue items, or one by one? It's entirely your choice. It's entirely on the basis of your preferences.
Which means like if it is bulk item, we cannot prioritize it or like
No, we can. No, I'm not saying that we cannot prioritize it. What I'm saying is
because in the properties panel we don't see any such options, right?
Yeah. So we have a set, I guess, set priorities, priorities or something.
Okay, there is the other way then.
Yeah, I mean, what you need to do is, I mean, basically what you need to do, you need to find a workaround for it. So you need to loop through the item and all those things. But directly you won't be able to do it. That's for sure. Okay.
Okay.
All right, guys. So anything else before I move to the next concept that we need to discuss? Anything regarding queues or so if you monitor queues, so this is how the dashboard would look like. So basically here you should be able to see what is your how many items you have queue, how many are them in progress, what is how many them are got completed and all those things. So basically support team looks after this. So they keep tracking this just to understand what is happening with my transaction item. So here you should be also able to see the failures, right? So this is basically this one. All right, so with this we are completing the module number 6. So just to give a conclusion, queues enable you to create a large automation project so that you can build a complex logic. The item status are controlled by the developer of the UiPath, and you should be also able to control the revision status, right? If you want to retry. By default, queue item has been processed successfully and archived on a daily basis. So if there are items which are left in a new status, they will be archived next day and their status will become abandoned. Right? So you also need to think through a strategy how you should be able to clean the queue items when you work for the large automation project. So usually there are some maintenance script that runs which cleans, archive the queue items and the log for the queues. Otherwise, it will be a problematic and your database performance will be degraded in a long term, right? All right, so the next thing that we need to discuss is reusability concept. All right, guys. So I'll quickly cover that. And for that, let me save this because I need to send this to you guys so that you can retry. And let me close this.